comes from Brisbane. She has undergrad degrees in zoology, geography, and writing from UQ. She looked at fisheries management, limnology, and mammalogy. She's also spent a bit of time over at the University of Wyoming, and she did her honours in marine biology, looking at functional immunity and growth performance of Atlantic salmon, fed sustainable diets. And so I think she's working in that really cool part where it's like, how do we look at resource management, agriculture, fisheries? How do we look at these things that we have to keep doing? And how do we do those in a way that's better for the environment? And so now, after some time with the Tassie fisheries industry, she's now working at NRM South, and she's leading the implementation of some really cool Commonwealth funded projects, restoring some wetlands and seagrass in Tassie near Hobart. So I'll just pass over to you, Grace. If you've got anything you want to add about yourself or the projects, please do. But otherwise, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining. I'll just screen share my presentation. Okay, that should be up. So, as Dylan mentioned, my two projects that I'll be talking about today are funded by the Australian government. And they were funded under a grant that was known as the Fisheries Habitat Restoration Program. And they're delivered by us at NRM South. I'll be talking to you about my two projects, the saltmarsh restoration at Pittwater Orielton Lagoon, which is a Ramsar site, and environmentally moorings at seagrass restoration in Northwest Bay. So I will start with the saltmarsh restoration at Pittwater Orielton Lagoon. So this is a photo that I took on site. It's just outside of Richmond, and I'll show you on a map shortly. And this was just after a really good flooding event on the healthy side of the marsh, and it's just a beautiful place to be. So we are working with the University of Tasmania. Ozfish Unlimited are helping us engage with the local recreational fishing community. The property owner of Richmond Park is a fantastic champion for the project, and I'll talk more about that soon. Various contractors for the on-ground works, and of course the Australian government. And that is just another picture of some of the healthy salt marsh there. So we are looking just outside of Hobart, half an hour outside of Hobart, near Richmond. There's a 1,065 hectare merino farm with the beginnings of a vineyard. And we're looking at the 65 hectare area here and around in red, adjacent to the Pittwater Orielton Lagoon Ramsar site. Just off there is the connection to the ocean. And we're going to be restoring the natural hydrology of the site by removing a levee that was installed between like the 1940s and 60s in sections. We're going to be protecting the salt marsh from livestock that are currently grazing and trampling it by fencing. We're going to reduce the weed infestation by primarily African boxthorn on site, doing some revegetation adjacent to the salt marsh to create that supportive microclimate, and doing various monitoring of the flora, the fauna, the water levels, and also engaging and building the capacity of the local recreational fishing community and involving them in the monitoring activities too. So this is a zoomed in map of our actual site works. So we'll be completing the fencing here in blue. That's where we're installing fencing to keep sheep off the marsh. The pink sections are where we're going to be doing weeding and revegetation, and we hope to do more up on these rises here and here under future funding. And down here is the levee. So this red section is what we'll be removing, and you can see that this is the deepest section of channel where the water comes through and floods the marsh, not in its entirety though. This green section is a natural sort of rise or levee, but it's got a large breach in it, and we'll be repairing that to remove some of the erosion and fish trapping behaviour that happens there. And that earth will be going back up to where it was originally up on this hillside here. So this is a picture from 1966, and you can see that that man-made levee was nearly completed then, but there was still water coming through. But there's that beginning of that eroded section there. It's just some context from history. This is a drone shot from October last year, and you can really see the stark contrast on the upper right. That's next to the Coal River, and there's a lot more vegetation on the outside of the levee, and on the inside it's just sparse. It's muddy. The limited vegetation that is there is in really terrible condition, and any fish that do make it in here just don't have good habitat to survive or thrive. It's filled with algae as well. And you can really clearly see that man-made section there and the hillside scar that will be returning that earth to. So here is an on-ground version from the hillside, looking at that healthy salt marsh and the unhealthy. So again, it's really clear. And you can see that there is water coming through in a few sections of the levee, but it's not happening in the gentle and gradual way that we want. And it's also quite, becomes ponded in there because its exit is really limited. So it becomes really anoxic as well. Here is a short video of the eroded section of the levee that we're going to be repairing in the natural section of the levee. And you can see this really active tidal inflow. There's Vishnu from the University of Tasmania out there. But that tidal inflow is far too fast for what we want to be seeing. It's causing that erosion and fish are being pulled in there as well. And that's back to that healthy side. And then I'll show you at low tide, this is completely undercut. So all those fish that get pulled in from the Coal River system, they then have no exit point in this section because they can't obviously walk over that land. So we're going to be repairing this, and we don't want to see all that bare ground as well. We'd like to see a lot more vegetation here, but those fast flows are quite an issue for this. Even this is on the healthy side of the marsh and it could be a lot better. Here is another breach in the levee. This is in the man-made section. We'll be completely removing this, but it's just another example of a fish trap where fish get pulled over at high tide, and then at low tide, they have no exit point back out. So there is one exit point, which is that pipe that I mentioned. You can just see there, and I'll show you another photo in a minute. And that's the only potential exit point for fish. So you've got 2 breaches and 1 pipe for them to get in, as well as the water, but only 1 exit point. Here is an example of a school of fish. I didn't get a species ID on these, but my guess is that they were smallmouth hardyhead, and they've been pulled in, and unless they can find that pipe, they're stuck in the marsh. They have no vegetation to shelter under. They're at risk of the anoxic conditions and like predation by the birds in much larger numbers than you'd want. It's really cool to see. It's very sad though, they're probably not going to last much longer. And this is that pipe. So this pipe would have been installed as a one-way valve. So you can see the top of that pipe, it would have used to have had a cap on it that meant that water could go out and drain the marsh to create more pasture, which would have been the original intention of installing the levee. But now that pipe has fallen off and water does go in and out, but it's just a very limited channel. We have found, a lot of fish coming in through the pipe, but we're waiting to collect more data on whether they also exit through that point. It would be their only exit point. So we have been working with Aboriginal Heritage Tasmania, Clarence City Council and the Tasmanian Government Natural Resource and Environment Department for permits relating to the site works. So most significantly is the works with Aboriginal Heritage Tasmania. So early on when we went to visit the site with the farmer, Will, he was very excited to tell us that he was pretty sure that there are stone tools on site. And so we got out some AHT staff and they verified that. We had the site fully assessed by archaeologists and an Aboriginal heritage officer who's an Aboriginal person, and they confirmed and did a full site assessment and mapped the heritage on site, and it's significant in its scope and it's also its cultural significance. So we've been connecting with the Aboriginal community in the area, and we've got a lot of support for this project to restore and even enhance the natural and cultural values of the site. But through that process, we need a permit, and that's through the state government, and that requires approval from the Tasmanian Minister of Aboriginal Affairs. And so there is a bit of a time delay there, just to make sure that everything that we're doing is well thought out and is as least impactful as possible in terms of bringing any equipment onto site and the earthworks and so on. And then the other 2 are just the permits to get that levee out, just earthworks permits. You can see there the sheep trampling all over the salt marsh, and then also a scarlet robin that I just saw the other week. We've seen them a few times. There's beautiful bird life on the site, and hopefully we can provide more habitat for them as well. So progress so far has largely been in the monitoring side of things with the University of Tasmania. We have installed water level loggers across the site to get good baseline data on how far up and how deep the water gets through the marsh. And hopefully we can show that it will pond much further up the marsh in the future. We've also been doing flora surveys using quadrats, fauna surveys in recent weeks with pike and seine nets, and we've also been engaging the community, the recreational fishing community, as well as people like wildcare groups and so on, coming out to some healthy saltmarsh at the Hobart Airport. They invited us out to have a look at that, which is a really good example of what we could be achieving at Richmond. And then we've also brought people on site to help us complete the flora surveys and doing a bird survey too. So we're getting them involved with the monitoring side of things to really upskill their and their understanding of the importance of saltmarsh as fish habitat and its various other benefits. So there's a pike net on the bottom left. Walking in with pike nets to install. The really difficult process of getting fish out of the pike nets in the dark and cold. And I think that one is either a yellow eye mullet or a smallmouth hardyhead, forgive me. There's mostly smallmouth hardyheads that we've been catching. This is a photo that I got on Monday night. We were sampling and just measuring the length and species of the fish that we've captured in the nets. And then we've just put them back into the water, and this crab happened to be in the right place at the right time. And the fish was just yoinked. And I just think it's funny because it looks like the silvery fish looks like a little sword for the crab. And then here's an example of a lot of the smallmouth hardyheads, just checking their length, measuring them, recording them, and then they go straight back into the water. And there's just heaps of fish, which is really good to see that we have a lot of potential habitat increase for them. So more pictures. There's Vishnu installing water level loggers, volunteers on site helping us complete the vegetation surveys. Here's me standing in the healthy side of the marsh, and Victor from UTAS putting a net around that pipe to see where the fish are coming in. And we did, and I think in that haul we got like 280 fish and 62 shrimp. So it's really good. So we are actually going to be able to do further works because that project that I've just been speaking about, it's due to run out in mid next year, but we've recently been awarded additional funding under the Blue Carbon Ecosystem Restoration Grants. So that will run until mid 2025. And under that, we'll be able to, this is from the Australian government, and we're going to be able to use the Richmond Park site as a demonstration site for tidal blue carbon restoration. And this is going to showcase the diverse benefits of blue carbon ecosystem restoration. So those are things like coastal resilience against flooding and sea level rise, emissions reduction, because salt marsh sediments are excellent at sequestering carbon. We're going to build the capacity of NRM practitioners such as ourselves and colleagues across Tasmania and the landholders to understand the benefits and the process to utilising the blue carbon system. And through the government as well, and we're going to be able to do more on-ground work, so more revegetation, more weeding, more fencing, and more erosion control to just do as much good as possible in this site. We're going to be able to monitor more broadly across more species and for longer, and really have a better record of how much this restoration impacts the area. And we'll also be working with an environmental economic accountant who will do a project level assessment of the benefits of the restoration before and after. So it's really exciting to have the capacity to do more on this site and understand more about its benefits. And I will briefly talk about the property owner, Will Eddington, Richmond Park. So he's starting a vineyard and he's hoping one day to have a cellar door on site, and hoping to create his farm as a location that people can come to, go to the cellar door, go on some walking tracks, and then look across the wetland. So he's really looking to showcase this as an area that you can approach the Ramsar site in an area on a private property that usually people wouldn't be able to get to. So he's really excited to open access to his property for the public and showcase. He's a big fan of wetland birds and fish, and yeah, so it's just great to have a partner like that. We'll talk about the seagrass restoration project next. So we're using environmentally friendly moorings. This is a picture of Bob Kelly, our mooring contractor, and that's holding an earlier iteration of an environmentally friendly mooring. So on this project, we're working with the CSIRO, and that's Dr. Tim Lynch pictured talking to some interested community members, and Ozfish Unlimited to again engage with the recreational fishing community, Kingborough Council, mooring leaseholders, Marine and Safety Tasmania, and the Australian government. So this is down south in Northwest Bay that we're working this time. So chain moorings, which is the typical mooring for a boat, they are very, very damaging to the benthos. So they reduce the habitat complexity. We'll be focusing on seagrass for this. And an example of a species that needs this habitat complexity is handfish, and there's a spotted handfish pictured there. And then once the mooring field is damaged and just sediment like pictured here, then it allows invasive marine pests to thrive, such as the northern Pacific sea star. So these chain swing moorings, you can see here, this is in Port Phillip Bay in Victoria. They scrape, and over time, this dragging across storm surges and months and years, you can see here that it just leaves sand. It just damages the seagrass, and just over and over that repetitive action. And you can see here in Dunalley in Tasmania that from the air, it's really clear how much damage they do to the seagrass, and you can see where the boats swing based on the shape of the mooring scar. And then here is a blurry photo around our study area of the same. So we are going to be installing environmentally friendly moorings. We're hoping there'll be 12 of them. This is a pilot study. We're hoping to restore 1.2 hectares of seagrass communities, including the fish habitat and benefiting the biodiversity. We'll be hoping to reduce habitat fragmentation and allowing the seagrass around the moorings and outside the scrapes to recover. They're really important for fish stocks. So out here we've got gold squid and calamari. And I should mention this in the saltmarsh, we're also looking at greenback flounder and Australian salmon and mullet. And we're also going to be looking to improve the mooring leaseholders' awareness of the positive impacts of environmentally friendly moorings and their understanding of the links between seagrass communities and fish productivity. So this is a sort of blurry photo of a mooring strop, but you can see it's not a chain, it's much more elastic, and I'll show you a diagram of one in a minute. So yeah, we'll be replacing 12 of them, and there'll be 4 control sites. We'll be monitoring the flora and fauna using dive surveys and photo quadrats, and also sediment coring, which I'll talk about in a moment. We're engaging the local community on field days and training workshops. We've had them come out on the boats and help us with monitoring methodology development and so on. And also we're doing surveys of the recreational fishing and mooring leaseholder community to see their understanding and awareness of the benefits that seagrass provide in habitat and also the impacts that chain moorings have on this habitat. So this is a diagram of the design that CSIRO have landed on for environmentally friendly moorings. So they have done a literature review, and it's pretty early days for EFMs. So there are a few small companies out there, and they've all got a different take on what an EFM should look like. But the main factor that makes it an environmentally friendly mooring is that it's just got one point of contact with the sediment rather than a chain dragging up. So that impact field is much smaller. So CSIRO have designed, I think Dylan or Kathy called it like bush engineering. They've got old train wheels to weigh down the mooring. Then they've got this black snake strop, which is used in the mining industry in Victoria for hauling vehicles. This is an Australian-made component, and then up to a nylon section and a float. So this section here, the strop, is much stretchier and elastic than a typical chain mooring, and that indications are that this is probably safer for boats in different weather events, because rather than a chain that gets pulled and then snaps, this has a bit of bounce to it. So it's likely to keep your vessel held and it will still be there the next day. And they're also pretty much cost comparable to a chain mooring. So the process that we've gone through is identifying volunteers in the area that we're interested in being part of the project, seeing whether their mooring met the specifications, so if it was at the right depth, how close it was to other vessels, so that it's not, if there is any stretch, we don't want it to stretch and then bump into another vessel while we're testing these. We work with the local regulator to approve the location, and then each mooring is designed and engineered specifically for that vessel and its location, and then we sign off a contract and deploy. This is just more pictures of the handfish. On the left is a handfish in a recovering mooring scar. And these down here on the bottom right are stalked ascidians, which handfish use for breeding habitat. and we're hoping to see those recover as well. But up here in the background, you can see this white tube, and you might have seen it in another picture before with the handfish. This is actually a ceramic tube, and it's designed to mimic the stalked ascidian as artificial breeding habitat. So in the meantime, while we work on recovering the stalked ascidians, we can, the local artist called Jane Bamford has been designing these ceramic breeding habitats for the handfish, and they've been deployed throughout the southern area. And she's also been working on artificial penguin burrows too for easy monitoring. They've got a little lid you can lift off. So it's great to engage with local people who are able to apply their talents to the efforts of our habitat restoration. So we have got all 12 volunteers signed on. 11 moorings were installed in the past 2 or 3 weeks. I'm waiting on some photos from Sarah. They're very busy, but 11 are in and one more is just getting the engineering specifications double checked before it goes in. So we've broken ground here, and we've got really great baseline data, and they're doing that sediment coring to look at the infauna, and also we've got a partner project on this for looking at the carbon sequestration capacity of the sediments here as well. So that's really good. Seagrass is also really great at stabilizing the sediment, which then sequesters carbon very well. And some more pictures from the field. So top left is just trialing video surveying, where we put either baited or unbaited and a GoPro down for an hour and just see what we see. We decided not to use that. Instead, we're just doing the dive surveys and photo quadrats. Here is an example of an attachment of a mooring to a boat. So everything that I've shown you so far is below the water there. This is an existing mooring Sarah have been working on for the past 4 years. But a really key component is the actual attachment between the boat and the mooring, and they've been working on that as well. So again, it's a bit of bush engineering where there's an old dairy hose and they've different types of ropes and so on, just making sure that's really secure and not rubbing and damaging. And then just, yeah, out in the field, beautiful days. Thank you, that's me.
Cool, thank you. And nice work in getting all those photos. I see Rosemary has a question. Rosemary, if you could turn your camera on and chat, speak it out loud, that would be great as well.
Hi, Grace. It's Rosemary Lott from the National Environmental Science Program, and I'm very excited to see that work, not only because of NEST, but also frequenting seagrass habitats with kayaking. Some seagrass habitats very shallow, and what I've seen, for example, in the Clyde River near Bateman's Bay, is boats will actually cut across where they shouldn't do with a falling tide or low tide, or try to just moor there in quite shallow situations, which is going to mean that the mooring could well drag even if it's soft. So do you have any thoughts on how this might then be used or adapted to much shallower seagrass situations?
Yeah, so in this instance, because each mooring is designed specifically for the boat, the length of that strop will change. So it's designed so that there wouldn't be any drag apart from that one contact point. So the length of the vessel, the depth of the mooring, all of that is taken into account, and how close it is to other vessels and so on. So each one is a little bit different, just to make sure that we don't lose out on that benefit.
So that then means it's designed for a particular location. What happens if the boat wants to move around and then?
So each mooring is like registered to one specific area. Otherwise, they'll be anchoring, and we don't really have any control or resourcing over the anchoring yet. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rosemary. Just before I throw to Gail, unless you have more to say, Rosemary, please interrupt me if you do. Is it possible then to design some kind of, like, because this obviously seems like the kind of thing you'd want to scale up, right? And get to a point where, you know, it's mandatory for all moorings to be seagrass friendly in seagrass habitat. Do you think it's possible to kind of over a large area basically say they need to all be between 1.2 and 1.5 meters or whatever it is, so that you could just have a mass-produced set for individual areas? Is that something that's in reach, or will you always have to design them specifically for the boat and the mooring?
I think it would need to be specific, and I would say it comes down to like, I mean, for us, it would come down to the safety and the environmental considerations, but broadly, it would come down to whether an insurance company is willing to insure your mooring and your boat. And for that, you would need to demonstrate that that mooring is secure for your boat in that location at that depth. So I would say that it would still be required that each one is dealt with individually.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. Go.
Thank you. Both of those projects look so great. Yeah, and it's terrific to be able to hear you speak about them today. What I was wondering was about climate change and whether the climate change and the projections that are there have been taken into account at all. With the first project, the saltmarsh one, I wondered whether you could think of that as being a climate adaptation. Will it allow the migration of saltmarsh as the sea level rises? Is that something that's kind of factored into it, or one of the benefits? And with the seagrass one, I was wondering about temperature rise and how that might impact on the particular species of seagrass. Were you hoping it would regenerate naturally, or was there any planting involved? And if so, maybe alternative species?
Those are really good questions. I'm glad you asked me the first one in particular, because it's so hard to remember to say things that are obvious to me, which is that saltmarsh it's surrounded by hill slope. So there will be some creep over time, but it's sort of limited in how much it can retreat. So we have taken into account that there's a buffer, but it's quite a slope that it's surrounded by. And in terms of the seagrass, we're not planting either saltmarsh or seagrass, so we're hoping for natural recovery. For the saltmarsh, we're doing that riparian vegetation to support the microclimate, and for the seagrass, it seems that it's most efficient to just let it grow itself. It's hard to say. There's not been a lot. It's been a long time since there's been very good mapping done of the species of seagrass in Tasmania. I think the last good survey was in 1982. So there is a lot to learn in that realm. So in terms of the temperature changes, it will depend on the species. I think it's probably largely Posidonia australis, and I don't know that we have any data yet on that. But we are very linked up with people that work in the kelp and seaweed side of things. So I expect that we can have those conversations. It's a really good point. But yeah,
I'll be interested to hear how you go with that.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Thank you for that. I note that Maria's posted in the chat. If you want to pop up Maria, otherwise she's talking about indicators for monitoring estuarine and marine habitats. Yeah. So,
I like the sound. Yeah.
Have you thought much about that? Is that something you've been considering in your evaluation?
Yeah, we've only recently, I mean, we heard that we got the blue carbon funding a couple of months ago, but it's only recently been made public. But before that, our money and ability to monitor would run out in mid-2023. So there are some ways that we can structure to get a bit more monitoring after the fact and getting the money out the door sooner and so on. But any rapid indicators for monitoring those recoveries I'd be really keen to hear about what you do in that space, because it takes 5 to 10 years to more for a wetland to recover, to show signs of the early recovery, let alone fully recover. So we are now going to be able to monitor till at least mid-2025, and hopefully that also requires that the property owner will be monitoring and reporting every 10 years. But the more the better, because we want to be able to prove that we know this is worthwhile, but we've got to prove it and have that to back it up and show that these projects are worth funding.
Thanks, Grace. So we'll refer, we've got a consultant just engaged to look at this, and he's about to set up some technical panels looking at different monitoring indicators for ecosystem recovery. And so we'll be in touch with you if that's okay. And it would be really good to have your input.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And just so everyone knows, Maria is from the Department of Environment and Science in Queensland.
If anyone else has any questions, please put your hand up. You know, and as broad or specific as possible. I think we want to make Grace work and have to come up with ideas she hasn't thought of before.
Okay. Ask me any.
Excellent. I was speaking with Ben from Nature Gurnell Trust last week, Ben Taylor, and he was talking about, along with the guy from one of the local landscape boards, whose name I've forgotten, from the Southeast Limestone Coast Landscape Board, which are the equivalent of the NRM bodies in South Australia. They were talking about how on a number of their wetland restoration sites, if there'd been enough encroachment of terrestrial vegetation when they restored natural flows, the flow just went out because the soil had changed, it was less porous. The veg continued to kind of turn the system into a terrestrial system, and then there was maybe like a small creek formed. Have you kind of assessed the possibility that things have changed a little bit too much? And how are you judging how you think things will bounce back after you restore natural flows?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to have to get in touch with Ben.
Yeah, cool. He's a cool guy.
The dynamics of that site, because we're working on, you know, area that's been, you know, agriculture area, and the main thing is the lack of that tidal flow with the levee, and then the sediment inflow and the ground hardening from the trampling hooves. So I'm hoping that with regular big flushes of water, that the sediment will restore to a more healthy area, and just getting all the nutrient input from the sheep being washed out. Hopefully that will be enough to reboot the system, but I don't know what the dynamics of the other sites that Ben's talking about are like, so I'm definitely going to have to reach out to him.
I think the whole point was some of these sites are really complex and they don't always move in a linear backwards and forwards direction. This one, though, seems less there. I think tea tree had kind of started spreading all the way over it, but I'll put you in touch. Yeah. Cool. And please, anyone else, if you've got further questions, please put your hand up. The other thought I'd had was this saltmarsh restoration project. Is this something people have been thinking about and talking about for a while before eventually a project got pulled together? What was the kind of history of,
100%. So, I mean, I guess I don't know exactly the makeup of our audience, but working in the NRM field, you always kind of need to have, thank you, I have met with Mark yesterday, Catherine. He's also a partner on another of our projects. We always have to have ideas ready in our back pockets and pretty well sketched out for when funding just arises in certain areas. So we need to be ready to put something forward in a grant application. So for the pitwater restoration at Richmond, we've known about that site for 10 or 15 years, and we've actually done some restoration works a little bit south, but on the same property in 2011. We did a bit of fencing, revegetation and weeding in that area for the property owner, and that is looking in really good condition. So we have been out there, we've been looking on satellite imagery. Vishnu once chartered a light plane over the area to take aerial photos, and he's met with the landowner himself and stood on the levee in 2010. So we are very well, like, there's obviously we don't know everything about what's happening in Tasmania and all the wetlands, but we know a lot of areas where we could be doing works, and we just got to be prepared. And when that funding arises, and obviously we're communicating upwards about where we would like, where we would benefit from funding. But yes, the answer is we have been talking about it for a long, long time, and it's great to get it off the ground. Yeah,
cool. Thank you. That's got to feel satisfying for all the people who've been involved.
Other people did work before me.
That's pretty good for you to just step in and get it going as well.
Yeah. So, and I'm really happy that we're partnered with Vishnu Prahalad from the University of Tasmania. He's the saltmarsh and wetland, expert of Tasmania. He's across it all. He's very, very passionate and extremely knowledgeable. And he's been in this space for 15 years or so. And he's the guy. And I think for him, it's a real achievement because he's the one that's identified these areas.
Yeah, great.
And I should say that by area, that 65 hectare of saltmarsh that we're looking to restore is, to my knowledge, the biggest saltmarsh restoration by area in Australia. So it's a really big achievement.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, and it's a good thing there's so much documentation before, so that you can kind of watch the recovery afterwards as well.
Yeah. I'm really excited, you know, to have hopefully public access to the area in the future, to be able to go there when I'm like 50 and see how healthy it is, fingers crossed.
Yeah, I like the idea of, you know, doing winery tours, but I feel like it'd be important to also let people who are not, you know, do not have the money to do that, or the inclination, access as well.
There'll be walking
without
trails
it.
and possibly mountain bike trails, and you know, there'll be a platform to look at birds, and this is all, you know, big picture, and it'll be a long while before that's there, but he's locked in that vision for the property, and it will happen.
Excellent.
Yeah.
The other thing on that point, Grace, is that when you have a champion like the owner of Richmond Park,
yes,
and they're showing sort of how you can wisely use wetlands and also, you know, secure some other income and revenue streams from those sites, it's really, really important as a demonstration project, particularly 100%. In Tas, where you've still got some sort of quite adversarial, you know, relationships around land use.
Yeah, so there are a lot of private properties that back onto the Pittwater area, Alton Lagoon, and all of them have their own story, you know, and some of them we might be able to tell that they've done something with their earthworks that maybe it wasn't legal, and that might mean that they didn't want to engage with us. But we want to show people the benefits of engaging with us, and that it's really about the restoration and recovery. You know, we're not the regulator, we're here to recover. Yeah. And so Will is an incredible champion for doing a restoration on a farm, and just for the project. He's a leader in the community and one of the biggest landowners in the area. So I think he's a really good person to talk up and demonstrate the benefits of this with.
Yeah, we have had some compliance issues down in that area, and we'd much rather we had this kind of, you know, the demonstration project and the landholders doing a lot of that kind of, you know, work with their peers.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And I understand, I mean, for me, having learned going through all the permitting and so on, it's arduous. So I can understand running a farm, it might slip back in the priority, but yeah, it's about upskilling and things like that.
Excellent.
Reading Maria's comment, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Biophysical attributes consistent with National Intertidal and Subtidal benthic classification scheme. Oh, and the final thing, unless anyone else wants to pop up, is you briefly touched on carbon accounting, but I think you said something about it not being blue carbon accounting. Could you just unpack that a little bit, what that involves?
So under the Blue Carbon Restoration, Carbon Ecosystem Restoration Grant, we've further funding for the Richmond Park site, the saltmarsh site, until mid-2025. So a portion of that funding, all the funding that's listed on the website is towards NRM South, and then there's another component that will go for the Australian government to tender to hire an environmental economic accountant. And what they'll be doing is a project level assessment of the benefits of the restoration. So looking at the carbon sequestration, how many emissions were avoided by doing this work, so and how much is being stored in the sediment, and so on, and then also being able to put that into dollar figures as well. But that is outside my area of expertise, and I will be.
And here's Alice to tell us all about it.
That'd be great.
Lovely to meet you, Grace. I thought I'd just jump in here because I guess I'm the one that's going to be involved in the measurement of anticipated restoration benefits, and doing the accounting of achieved restoration benefits. Yeah. So it's going to cover. Pardon?
Have you been chatting with my manager, Jen?
Oh, we've been chatting to everyone. I've been chatting to everyone. So what are the things that you think will be the anticipated benefits of the restoration activities, to know kind of what this could cover? And it's diverse benefits. So I guess our program at, what are we now? The TUE, not DOR. It's different to Clean Energy Regulator that only focuses on the carbon side of things and emissions avoidance. That our remit are the diverse benefits for climate, including flood risk reduction, you know, coastal erosion, all those things as well. Diverse biodiversity benefits, diverse benefits for people, including community, traditional owners, and also carbon's in with that, but there's now a blue carbon calculator that you can actually estimate the sequestration from plants and soil and emissions avoided. So probably it would be smarter to spend more money on doing the measurements of all the things that are less well known about restoration processes, ecosystem interactions, all those types of things. So that's kind of what the open tender that goes out will be, to measure the pre-post, and it looks like you've already got a head start with some of the baseline data collection, and then also doing the accounting work as well as that. So it's kind of a two-part thing.
Fantastic. Yeah, we're making sure that the monitoring we're doing as part of this project will be complementary to the monitoring part of the blue carbon. Yeah. I haven't received, I'm going to be managing this, I think, and I haven't received my handover yet, so.
Excellent. Thank you. Grace, did you have any final thoughts or anything that you're kind of excited about or thinking about moving forward before we wrap up?
I think just to say on a personal note, it's just been amazing to be part of this project. And I think the process with the Aboriginal heritage that we found on site and learning about that, engaging with the community, the opportunity that I have to walk out on country, and from a scientific perspective, I've learned so much more each time about how to manage that site. I think it's so important to get out into the area that you're going to be managing and making decisions on. You know, you can talk and you can look at maps and everything, but getting out there and seeing the dynamics in different weather, speaking to people that know the country themselves, it's just a lot of fun and really important. That's probably been my biggest learning for the project.
Yeah, I would echo that. We were out at the Coorong last week. We met with the Ngarrindjeri, we met with the local landscape boards, and a bunch of people who've been working on the site, and that kind of pulling together that accumulated understanding of how things work. It's good to do your homework and read to read the research and to understand all the data, but it's different. And I feel like humans can kind of intuitively understand landscapes if we're in them and kind of learning about them. So cool. You have a great job. Thank you very much for this talk. I hope you got something out of it. I'm sure all of us in the audience did as well. And thank you everyone for coming. I hope you had a good time yourselves. The next one of these, Grace, if you want to jump in.
I was just going to say thank you for all the comments. I'm reading them all. That's all. And please reach out to me by email or phone or anything, even just to say hi. Always happy to chat.
Yeah, please do. Also, if you have anyone you think would make a good presenter, or if you want to get in touch about youth engagement with wetlands, please do. There's a fair bit happening. You know, we've got this event coming up in National Science Week. We've also, next week, I'll be meeting with the Wetlands and Wildfowl Trust, as well as the Australasian Flyway Partnership, Wetlands International, and a few others, talking about a youth side event at the COP. Various other things happening in the wetland space. I can also tentatively say that there'll be some youth water forum in maybe September, October in the Murray-Darling Basin. Things are happening. Thank you all for coming very much, and please come along next month. More details soon. Thank you so much, Grace. Have a nice day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Grace. I think you're going to be sought out now.
I'm still figuring it all out, so I welcome advice and expertise.
Well, thanks for your presentation. It's you've got a really interesting, wide audience as well. So people externally, and also a lot of the good door.
It's really good. I'll have to go back and look over who's been joining us.
Yeah, I can send you a little list. Oh, Max is gone. Max Finlayson.
Oh, yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. It's part of our Australian Wetlands Network.
Yeah, I've been to a few of his presentations. They're really good.
Yeah. The other thing we might want to think about with Dylan too, as part of the Ramsar COP, and I think there's going to be, you know, if we do this youth side event, is actually just having some webinars run globally as well, and some of the work that young people are doing. So we might hit you up again
Yeah, cool. We've got a new project officer who's working on red handfish and swan
Oh,
blacks.
yes, please.
So we could probably link that up. Yeah.
We all
Thanks,
love the handfish. I see Morella's still online.
They're so cute. They look like little trolls and I love them.
Oh, okay. So how long have they been involved in the project?
Handfish. So they're not formally involved.
No, I mean the project officer. So in terms of whether they've got enough material to present. Yeah.
Yeah, like a month. We've had quite a few staff joining in, but yeah, no, I think he'd be keen. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. We'll put that one down as well, Dylan. Handfish prezzo.
Yeah, cool. That sounds
Definitely.
fun.
Yeah.
We haven't had enough fish-focused stuff yet, so maybe.
I'm really relieved to have a few more fish photos because I got most of my good photos in the past 3 days. And we've been out from noon until I got home at 11 o'clock on Monday night, just covered.
Oh, that's a long stint.
Yeah, at one point I went out to check the water depth on one section where we had put a marker 2 weeks ago, and I went out to it and we were seining, and I just stepped in, and then I was just thigh deep in mud all of a sudden, and I was like, okay, it's dark, there are things here, but I'm like, don't panic. But,
is that kind of mud that there's like the suction as you try and pull out too, and was it easy to get out? Oh. All right.
He's gone.
Wrong question, I guess.
I'm just going to